All right. Thank you so much, Linux Foundation and I Love Pets Project. We do love pets, isn't it? So I think the stage that has been set with Ravi, Mike, Vint, Mingshen, and Tina, if you look at, if you summarize it, we are talking about strategy, we are talking about vision, we are talking about engineering, we are talking about how to do things, with transparency, integrity, and safely, along with using open source. And if I refer to Dr. Emmanuel, he mentioned it's a story, it's a stage, and it's a play. And if you think about who is the writer, who's the author, narrator, composer, singer, actor, director, stage manager for all of it, all of the story or the play, I'd say it'd be our developers. And I'm thinking of, okay, now we went through DevSecOps, shifting left. Now it's privacy. Data is the new currency. How do we ensure everything that we are doing, we are mining the data while keeping people safe, keeping information safe, having the privacy lifecycle embedded into software development, having the data lifecycle embedded into the development, having the even non-human identity lifecycle embedded into the development that we are working with. So in the end, it's the developer who is doing all of it. So what I have done is attempted to see privacy engineering, engineering and privacy enhancing technologies from the eyes of a developer. I mean, if you remember Steve Ballmer's famous video, he goes developer, 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 and that has been my theme all along in my shop, where we, bring new things, bring AI, bring NHI, bring governance. But the most important thing is how are we actively engaging, enabling, empowering, and above all, entrusting our developers. So this is an attempt towards saying, hey, I'm a developer. I worked on shifting left. I worked on Agile. I worked on um, DevSecOps. Now, what do we do with privacy, and what am I going to do with all of these in the age of agentic software? One of the challenges that I have as a developer, that everybody is doing their part in bringing the strategy, bringing the things, bringing the processes, bringing the engineering, what we need to do, but all of them are fragmented and siloed. What do we do to make sure that we have a cohesive direction for a developer to follow? A kind of a cheat sheet. If you look at an airplane is the most complex thing to operate, but it starts with small thing called cheat sheet, a checklist. So my attempt has been to look at what am I going to do as a developer, be it going for open source, going for shift left, DevSecOps and all that. And the other thing is the technology that we are working with, especially AI, is rapidly evolving. Regulation, industry practices, and the frameworks are playing catch up. So how do I enable and empower a developer? That's where we need to think together as a larger group and help the developers support. Yes, we are vibe coding and doing everything agentically, even in development, but all of this has to be articulated in an easy to digest, a practice where a developer is going to continue develop securely and ensuring the data that thus mined continues to be safe, and we are protecting the society. And as we all know, the developers' speed is outpacing governance, and we are all playing catch up. The innovation velocity, security, and other needs that are coming up with the development, they are they are in a need to be in balance with privacy requirements. And we need to enable our security champions to include privacy and data security as they develop, as they architect a solution, as they scan codes. code, as they review for vulnerabilities, they should also look into how we are exposing data, how we are securing data. So we have to shift left on privacy faster than we did earlier in other events. So the first building block that I see is governance and policy. A developer needs to be aware of legal, statutory, and compliance policies. So if there is a policy change, the enterprise should be able to provide those governance and policy changes faster to the developer so that they can continue to develop, because no developer wants to be in a situation where they have gotten an issued finding or they are in a challenging situation because of vulnerability or data exposure. We need a comprehensive governance framework to be established. Data security lifecycle thinking has to be added, because when a developer sets on development, they're looking at the features, they're looking at functionalities, but we need to inject the data flow in their mindset, how the non-human identity is going to come in, bring the data, decide on them, and what's the data lifecycle. And we should always ensure the government policies are readily available for our assessments. Anytime you start development, there should be a privacy and data security assessment along with the security assessment. And the AI ML frameworks that we are working with should be in compliance with all the requirements that are in various organizations that the data or the software will be working. And there has to be an attestation workflow for non-human identities and their access. Because what has happened is for each individual human identity, there's anything between 60 to 90%, 90 rather, non-human identities if you are looking at agentic software that we are building. So there has to be a identity life cycle. And at the beginning, there should be attestation. While it's being done, there should be some regular attestation done. And also, once it's the life cycle is done, we should be able to assess whether or not the access has been reduced or eliminated as required. The second, I think I don't have to kind of explain much on that, because all of the previous speakers talked about how privacy enhancing technologies are helping. But from the point of view of a developer, while we are working with the zeros and ones in the libraries, we need to ensure various aspects are ingrained with in our developers' minds, as we have ensured the OWASP top 10 and SQL handling input validations and role-based access controls are ingrained in our software development lifecycle. Same way, we need to ensure things like differential privacy, federated learning, homomorphic encryption, SMPC, runtime attestation, security enclaves, and monitoring the model poisoning and data leakage are part of our developers' mindset. One thing I'm very passionate about is making sure code signing is an important piece where developer is assured of that, hey, this is the code that developer built, and this is the code that's going to production. So that's one of the more important things that we need to make sure it is there. And even we are building some data, right? So when a developer is creating developing that software, we should be making sure the data thus used is synthetic. We need to be able to have artificial data sets that mimic the real data distribution. We can use that for training, sharing, and see how the data flows, and making sure the integrity and the privacy of data is there by using this synthetic data. Now we are talking about non-human identities, right? Everybody's talking about agentic software. How will this building block in the developer's mindset will work? We need AI ML models. They perform autonomous decision-making, predictions, and data processing. The important security and privacy considerations that should be considered are: ensure the models are trained on privacy-preserving data sets, apply differential privacy or federated learning, monitor, and then this is an important part where our developers need to be trained on this thing. How will they be monitoring for adversarial attacks and model inversion risks? So this is a new technology that I would love to have our security champion programs have that as a part of training our security conscious developers who are always supporting dev teams. RPA bots, those robotic process automation, we need to make sure we have least privilege. And this is nothing new. It is again talking about principle of zero trust, least privilege, trust but verify. And make sure logbot actions for auditability. Auditability is very, very important as we move towards building agentic software. And we want to make sure bots don't bypass authentication or access sensitive data without oversight. So a developer has to think, hey, I'm going to build a bot. And how do I ensure there is auditability? There is evidence collection happening because all of us are regulated somehow, and we should be, to maintain the security, maintain the privacy, and all the data security considerations. So when you're working with RPA bots, we have to also think about the model provenance and firmware integrity. We got to track the origin, training data, and update history of models and device firmware that we've been using. We need to ensure we are using signed models and firmware. And one of the things that we've been working for, I think, past 5-6 years about maintaining SBOMs. We need to think about maintaining AI SBOMs. So how we put all of these together and ensure the open source that we are working are secure, vulnerability free, and they are providing the safety and security to our privacy concerns. As Ravi had mentioned in earlier his presentation about API trust boundaries, we need to ensure API gateways and authentication tokens are being used. We monitor data flows and enforce rate limits, prevent data leakage across trust boundaries. Now we are talking about identity attestation audit trail, as I was mentioning earlier. We need to make sure we verify the identity and integrity of non-human agents and track their actions. We need to think beyond PAM. The privileged access management that we've been doing for humans, we need to add multi-dimensions on how we are going to be working with identity attestation and audit trails for non-human identities, and how we are going to ensure there is a cryptographic attestation and there is an immutable log of agent activity, and ensure the traceability and compliance that we have. And of course, we have to follow our zero trust principles, enforce continuous authentication, apply least privilege and dynamic access control, monitor behavior for anomalies, and revoke access when needed. So all of this, a developer has to think while they're building the application. They should not wait when they push to production and things happen. They should work with their privacy assessors, security assessment folks, to ensure they get the direction and think about how they can learn from each other and how we can, as an enterprise, as leaders, train our developers to think about how they can secure the non-human identities. Now, coming back to the poor software developer, that person has to think about design, development, testing, deployment, and monitoring, the infinite loop of DevSecOps. And we are injecting privacy to it. And if you look at 96% of the software is using open source, and and in that, about 50 to 80% of the code base is open source. And now we are talking about privacy enhancing technologies, and what we want to do is ensure they are open source as well. So the developer has to think about the open source libraries and how they are building their applications with the open source, and where are the various points they need to think about to ensure the integrity, the safety, and the transparency. When the developer is developing, they are doing a proper code review. And there's the SCM, source control system, is secure. And then code transition after some source control is part of your source integrity processes. And when you are building the platform, the build platform should also be free from vulnerability or anything that would impact the privacy of the data, of the user, of the data use life cycle that we are working with. And the dependencies that we are working with are properly maintained. And the CI/CD controls are working towards ensuring the integrity of all the open source libraries and open source models that we've been working, along with package repos and package integrity. Now, as an enterprise, as leaders, what do we need to make sure? We need to make sure that they have the frameworks for ensuring that they get the libraries, whether it's privacy enhancing or developer supporting, from qualified, vulnerability-free ecosystems. There should be a proper model approval process. And of course, there will be a chance of shadow IT coming in and shadow AI coming in. And there is a danger of losing your data, losing the nature of protections that your enterprise has been providing. So we need to make sure source code control, continuous integration, and even the developer tooling is secure. Model repository that we are doing, the supply chain, the entire supply chain that we have, it is secure and it is constantly regulated. It should be no N-5 or N-2, depending on the nature of the organization. End of life. There's no typo squatting or any model poisoning happening. And the most important thing that I believe for the developers and the leaders, you should be making sure the SBOM or the AI bombs that we have, they're continuously reviewed, continuously attested, and ensured that they are free from anything that would jeopardize the integrity of privacy and data protections, as was thought of in our development life cycle. So the other considerations that we should think about if you're developing using open source libraries and models for privacy enhancing technologies, data minimization, transparency and explainability, consent and control. We need to ensure we are not collecting unnecessary data. We are ensuring all of the telemetry that we are working on, all the tracking that we are working on, are auditable, are reviewed, and signed off, not only by the developer, but at the highest executive in their organization, so that there is a shared responsibility model. And then if we have transparency and explainability, we need to make sure we have clear documentation. Logs are there, they are auditable and secured for evidence as required by the governance or regulatory agencies. And in terms of consent and controls, we need to make sure, like the regulations that we have in California and Europe, we do need to make sure if we have consent, we have a life cycle for that consent too. We need to make sure the user is able to, for the right to be forgotten, whenever they can opt out of a certain approval they had already given. There should be granular configuration of data access. Who's using it? What is being used for? Why are they using it? How long they're going to use it? And they should not be able to override user preferences. And last, I think models and libraries that we are using, as I mentioned, should be trusted, and they are regularly scanned for CVEs or KEVs. The awareness, context awareness is very, very important. The developer should not mix data across domains without control, without approval, and without consent of the users. So we need to build in while we are developing these softwares. And lifecycle management, last but not least, we should be able to work towards ensuring it is auditable, licensed, and the evidence is available for all the regulatory agencies that we are. That's all I had. Any questions, issues, concerns?